Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you here today. I've been asked to give you an airman's perspective on leadership. But before I explore these, please indulge me while I give you an extremely brief rundown on myself. I've spent 24 years in this Air Force. I can essentially break that down into 3 discrete careers. During my journeyman years, I was an air surveillance operator. I then was lucky enough to specialise in space operations, as the Wing Commander said, included a number of years in Denver, which served to expose me to an American model of leadership and help shape my opinions and actions in future years. I also spent about 6 years in and around the remotely piloted aircraft world, including a number of deployments with that capability. That has exposed me to leadership at war, which again is a slightly different skill set and one I hope to be able to expand on this afternoon. While I've had an interesting and diverse career, I'm not a leadership expert. I'm observant and I generally remember what I liked and what I disliked about my various leaders as I've grown into the professional you see before you. This presentation is my opinion and my observation only, and I'll welcome questions during the panel challenge me on these views, or in the breaks if you really want to get stuck into me. I'm going to structure my presentation into 3 themes. So if you remember nothing else from me today, I want you to remember these 3 tenets of leadership. I think they apply across all domains, all services and all ranks. Consistency, courage and culture. As I reflect on my experience as being a leader, and perhaps more importantly my experience as a follower, these 3 themes reoccur over and over again and represent to me the basics. I'll explore these 3 themes by walking you through some notable experiences I've had, some case studies as it were. For me, consistency represents a crucial component of any leadership model, essentially allowing those under your charge to know what to expect and how to behave. Consistency means that if a junior airman commits an offence, they will be dealt with in the same manner as if a junior officer committed a similar offence. Or if I'm expected to show up at work on time every day, then I have a reasonable expectation my commander will adhere to a similar timetable. Not go surfing because the wind is sick today. Yes, that was an actual phone call I received. Now, some of you may not consider leadership to be important a principle as I do. However, I'm here to tell you that consistency is an expectation of every single member you ever lead. As a squadron officer, I crave that level of consistency from my CO. I needed to know that when I walked in with an issue, I'd get a consistent response. During my first tour as a squadron officer, my CO did not provide that assurance to me. I am absolutely serious when I tell you that this CO reacted to a member, his member, getting removed from a deployment for conduct unbecoming with a shrug. But within the same month, wanted another member severely disciplined because they were late for work and he had happened to see them walk in that morning. In my time at that unit, I believe the vast majority of personnel operated in a state of constant low-level stress that the boss would do a walk around, myself included. I presume I don't need to point out this is certainly not an ideal climate to foster within a workplace. By upholding consistent values and expectations, a commander is giving their people one less thing to think about and allowing them to get on with the job at hand. It also helps other leaders within that organisation to understand what behaviour is acceptable and enforce those standards accordingly. This is my second tenet of leadership, another important aspect that as a follower I want to see in my leaders. During my time in Denver, I operated a missile warning system, providing early warning to NORAD and the US government on incoming missile events. In hindsight, it was kind of a big deal, and we were held absolutely to account for the information we passed up the chain. And when I say account, I mean there would be significantly retraining and paperwork raised if we made one mistake. At one point during my tour, I had a USAF captain as a crew commander. And when the intel folk gave us a heads up that a country was going to fire a missile, he would disappear to the bathroom, sometimes for over an hour, leaving the crew to operate around him. This became a recurring theme for this individual. Knowing what I know now about the USAF system, I understand that he was protecting his career. A mistake would represent a black mark on his record and affect his next promotion. In the bluntest of terms, as my leader, I considered him to be a coward. The rest of the crew knew why he did it, and it became a standing joke when something came up. As one of the senior airmen on the crew, I held all those under me to my standards, which made my job extremely difficult. It was a testament to the team we had that even without a crew commander, we excelled at the job we did. That leader had lost his mandate to lead because of his unwillingness to stand together with his team through not just the easy times, but also the challenging ones. Purely by accident, the last two examples I've given you dovetail very nicely into this last one. It's what we're all here for today and the theme of this seminar. As members of the ADF, we hear about culture on a fairly regular basis. And as we heard earlier, it's the theme for Wing Commander Pendlebury's PhD. The last case study I have for you today, and the most difficult story I will share, occurred during one of my deployments to Afghanistan with the Heron UAV detachment. We were 30-odd disparate people ranging from pilots to intelligence analysts, logistic officers to AvTechs, avionics technicians, from various locations across Australia. We lived together, we mostly ate together, and we worked in a secure compound on the other side of the base. We flew an unarmed UAV. In very simplistic terms, our regular day consisted of getting airborne around 4 a.m, finding the baddies at dawn, advising headquarters, and then observing local atmospherics after any strike missions. I was a sensor operator, and so was part of the aircrew team. All our tasking was sent down to us from ISAF headquarters. So that's the scene set. And in case it's not obvious to anyone, what I've just described, with the luxury of hindsight, is an almost completely closed loop, closed system. A small one, but closed nonetheless. In the early part of the deployment, during a flight in the north of the region, I managed to find a guy walking to the top of a hill and gave chase. Throughout the day, it became clear that he was a spotter for the Taliban, and he was reporting air movements happening at a nearby forward operating base. Following the required reporting, the wheels turned and processes happened, and a fire mission was generated. I happened to be a very good sensor operator, and I had a good pilot that day. So in reasonably good definition, I captured 2 Hellfire missiles from a US Army Apache helicopter land on top of this guy. What no one on the team expected was for him to subsequently get up and hobble down the hill. We continued to follow him, and I handed over to the next crew. Post-activity reporting suggested that he succumbed to his injuries later that night. Another day at the office, you might say. In this profession of arms, we are authorised to bring violence on other humans in support of government objectives. At this stage of my career, I had over 1,000 hours of these types of mission on this aircraft, so no big deal, right? Until it became a big deal. This strike proved to be the catalyst for a good proportion of the members of the detachment to think that we needed to do a lot more of this, that we needed to seek out strikes and get a lot more involved in the terminal end of warfighting. And unfortunately, the strongest proponent for this new direction was the commanding officer. Seeking out kill missions became the overriding priority for the detachment. We passed up ISR missions to do direct support. On boring missions, crews would search through chat logs to see what was happening near and around us so we could get involved. In effect, the culture of the detachment had rapidly changed direction, was spiralling downwards, and within this closed loop system, that change continued to multiply and manifest. My personal aha moment came when a number of junior Australian parliamentarians visited the detachment as part of an exchange program. They were duly brought over to our compound, and the very first thing that the commander did for the tour was to show them the footage of the strike I've just described as a primer. It was gory and it was graphic. I just happened to be sitting in the back of the room doing some flight planning, and I can't describe the horrified look on the face of these young men and women. Equally, I don't want to describe the look of bloodlust in the eyes of the commander as he was briefing them. In my opinion, our culture had turned bad, but we were so deep in it, we couldn't see outside to establish a normal. The only reason I could see it was by that stage I'd suffered a major depressive episode and had completely detached from the team, based largely on the behaviours I've just described above. I was struggling to comprehend my team's behaviours every single day. PTSD followed close behind, and once I returned to Australia, I had to undertake a significant amount of psychological support. The reason I've shared this story today is that every leader and every follower has a role to play in the culture of an organisation. And I see it as a primary leadership responsibility to be able to step out, look around, and work out if the culture of your organisation is what it should be. And if it isn't, make serious attempts to reset it. What I've described here is easy to be discounted because we are on operations. War is hell and all that. However, in my experience, culture is one of the most important things on operations, and often the most frequently overlooked. When on operations, I'm always confident that the work of the unit will always get done. Intrinsic motivation is high to achieve the goal. So as a manager, during any deployments I was on, I spent most of my time nurturing culture. Cross-sectional culture, cross-unit culture, and cross-rank culture. In my experience, this is always time well spent, and in an emotional, fragile environment, serves to head off potential pressure points early. Ladies and gents, I hope that the experience I've shared with you today goes some way to giving you a greater understanding of an enlisted perspective on leadership. As I said at the beginning, these have all been factual examples that have shaped my leadership style and the standards I expect from my subordinates, but more importantly, the standards I expect from my leaders. In wrapping up, I want you to take 3 things away from me today. That subordinates crave consistency. If they know what's expected and are held to account for it, then it's one less thing they have to worry about. That courage is not just about bravery under fire, it's about moral standards and upholding them even when it's not popular or self-fulfilling. And that culture matters, and it matters a hell of a lot. If it's not constantly nurtured, it can really get away from you. There are certainly other aspects of leadership that are essential for success, including compassion and competence. But I've only had a short time today, so I've selected those that are the most pertinent to me personally. And if I may just leave you with one last thought. If as a leader, at any level of an organisation, you lack consistency and courage, then what do you think the culture within your organisation is going to look like? Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for your time today.